Hello and welcome everyone to our third Tuesday at 3 series for May 2025. Secure your data for Gemini AI. I'm Alan Falcon, CEO of Cumulus Global, and I'm very happy to also welcome Paul Lees, who is CEO of Bespin Labs, and as he joins us here as we talk about this important topic today. A quick set of housekeeping things before we get going. As a reminder, the audio is muted. So if at any point in time during the session today you've got a question or concern, the best way is to use the icon at the top or right-hand side of your screen. It'll open a questions window. It'll alert me. We can get those answered either in real time or after the fact. Also, a reminder that the session's being recorded. We generally get these posted within 24 hours, so feel free to share that. And as always, our 3 series is one of many types of resources we offer through our online resource center. So when you have a moment, browse around, take a look. And if there's information you're looking for that's not up there yet, let us know. We'll help you find it. With that said, I want to really take an official welcome to Paul Lees, CEO of Bespin Labs. They offer a product called Patronum. One component of it is highly related to the topic at hand. So I wanted to include him in the conversation as he has some great expertise in the matter of securing your data, particularly within Google Drive and shared drives, as we start using Gemini AI as well as other AI tools. And so, Paul, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you.
And let's dig in. I'm going to move really quickly so we leave as much time to look at solutions and talk about the issues at hand. So a lot to cover today. We'll talk about the need for data security within Workspace, some key security principles, and we're going to look at a solution, particularly because of the increasing demands related to AI, Gemini, as well as other third-party tools you might integrate with your Google Workspace environment. So upfront, the need really comes from oversharing. And that's really that when someone gives access to information, that's unintentionally giving others access to the information directly or indirectly. And it's a pretty broad definition, and it's really, really common. Why? Because when you're sharing by link, which is the preferred way to share not only within Google Workspace, but Microsoft 365 and other collaboration platforms, the most common thing that happens is you're prompted when you share by link is to give it to anyone with the link or anyone within your company. In fact, in Google Workspace, if you're in a chat with someone and you want to give them a file or share a file or folder with them, even if they already have permissions, you're asked to reshare it for that purpose, and by default, it's anyone with the link. We tend to do that when we're attaching documents or links to documents in email as well, whether they're internal or external. And the problem with that is it makes it available, right? So when I send an email out to a client, if I share it and use the default, anyone with a link, I'm sort of trusting that that person's only going to share that email or forward that email to people who should have it. But that's not always the case. And we do see a lot of people sharing anyone within the company as a default just because it makes it easier and people don't, they have access to the documents they need. Now, it's not really a problem because most people don't go looking for things that they're not supposed to have access to. And so that can work pretty well, even though it creates a security risk, particularly if you're under regulatory rules. It generally doesn't cause problems or breaches, certainly not intentional breaches. The challenge, though, is when you get into AI and someone starts using Gemini or a third-party integrated AI tool, and their answer, an AI goes to answer that prompt, it's going to look for all related information that individual has the permissions to see. So suddenly, information that's been shared with them that they weren't aware was shared with them, that shouldn't be shared with them, could come up in the results of that search. And that really gets into another aspect of the need, which is deliberate acts. Okay, and when we talk about a deliberate act, sharing is always a deliberate act. I want to give so-and-so or this group access to this information. We often conflate deliberate act with intentional. And I want to be really careful here that while the act of sharing is deliberate, the intent may not be to overshare. And so many user actions can, as I've discussed, and will share information beyond what's appropriate, even if the user does not intend for that to happen. And so this is why when we talk about security awareness training, most people think, oh, that's emails, right? What not to click on, what can be spam, what could be phishing, etc. File permissions are less visible to us. We tend to set them and forget them, right? Oh, the administrator puts the permissions on the folders and the files, and that's going to protect us. Even though within our highly collaborative Google Workspace ecosystem, further sharing is one of the advantages. And so we see that while all of our focus tends to be on email when it comes to deliberate acts, we can't afford to be less diligent with our files and folders. And that really comes back to the whole model that both Google and Microsoft use when they secure their cloud services. And that's the shared responsibility model. And we've got blog posts and white papers on this. What it really means is that Google and Microsoft are making sure that the service is secure. But the responsibility to make sure your data is secure and properly protected is 100% on you. They'll work to keep unauthorized people from accessing the system. It's your responsibility to keep your accounts from being compromised, which gives authorized access, even if it's criminal. It's your responsibility to set file and folder permissions and access controls and manage that. And so, for example, you'll make decisions. You can administratively block all external file sharing in Google Workspace. Chances are you don't want to do it because you want to share that proposal with your client, or you want to be able to share data sheets or other information that's in your shared drives or Google My Drive with your clients or prospects or vendors that you work with. If you choose to allow external file sharing globally and you don't take the actions to protect shared drives, folders, and files, then it's your responsibility if those are shared too much. And that's really where the shared responsibility model comes into play. And so this adds a complexity. And what's interesting is it's always been an issue, right? We've always talked about the need to actively manage permissions in your environment. Now with Gemini AI, and even if you're integrating third-party AI tools that have access to your files and folders, you have to be very careful to make sure that things that were shared that people might not be aware were overshared don't get out. And really, we're starting to see even a new term, which is the AI data breach, which is we thought we had everything properly protected, but our AI system found and shared the data in a way it shouldn't have. So we look at key security principles. Let's talk about Gemini and the AI ecosystem that's now built into Google Workspace. So Gemini uses the security rights and permissions of the individual user, which means the user, when a user goes in and does a prompt in Gemini AI, Gemini AI might find information that that user isn't aware that they have access to. And that's where the risk comes in. And I guess I've been a little repetitive on this, but that's sort of the key to it all, okay, is that Gemini can and will use content that should remain protected. So the way you protect against this is data loss prevention. It's not new, it's not exciting, but the scope of what we need to worry about with DLP right now is growing because of AI. So what is DLP for those not familiar? The basics, it's a set of policies and rules that you're going to use to handle your sensitive, protected, or confidential information. DLP systems will analyze the actual contents of your files and folders against policies and rules. Most basic DLP systems have built-in rules, such as anything that looks like a credit card or a bank account routing number, a bank account number, a social security or tax ID number. We know that those need to be private, so those rules will be pre-built. Better systems let businesses create their own rules about what can be shared and what's not, as well as what happens when the sharing when sharing exists. A basic DLP system will notify and report, and hopefully automatically mitigate violations. So you have a system running in the background, and of your Google Drive environment, and saying, "Hey, we have a rule that says don't allow invoices to go out publicly." Okay. If an invoice in your system is accidentally publicly shared, that system's going to flag it. It should, at the very least, notify the people involved or IT or an administrator that that's happening. Ideally, it'll strip the permissions as well to prevent the leak. When we get into better, more advanced solutions, Then it gets into conditional access. Oh, or time-limited access. Oh, I'm going to share this file for 3 days and then take the permissions off in 3 days. Because I know sharing it with this person who's outside my company poses a risk. I'm going to limit the time they can look at the file and do that work. Conditional access can be only shared if certain conditions are met. And the ability to manage permission overrides. So you might have a rule that says, hey, don't share anything with an employee's social security number externally. And yet at times you might need to send an email message to an insurance, your health insurance coordinator that includes PHI, that you have to allow that sharing. And hopefully when you do that, you're also making sure it's properly encrypted. And so there's a little more complexity and a little more thing, what we need to do to properly protect our environment. And this goes beyond the capabilities. Now, in Google Workspace, you can get DLP services. They are functional and effective. They come at the enterprise tier. So for most of our clients who are small and mid-sized businesses, it's a significant cost increase to move up from your business standard or business plus license to an enterprise standard or enterprise plus license to get those DLPs. The other aspect of the DLP within Google Workspace is it uses the admin console interface. And as we know, the admin console is structured in a very, I would say it's settings centric as opposed to functionally centric, right? So when we look at providing that file governance, we look at tools that let us do it in a way that is intuitive, provides a better user interface. It's easier to set up, monitor, and manage and communicate than even what's in the native admin console. And for that, and this is where I'm going to sort of hand things off to Paul, and I'll actually make him the presenter because he's going to show us what Patronum looks like. And Patronum is a full-service Google Workspace admin tool. We include it in some of our managed cloud service packages, and it's always available as an add-on. But today we're going to focus, there's a lot of things as you can see on the screen. Today we're going to focus on the file governance because that best relates to the security around files and folders when Gemini AI is in play. And so Paul, I've handed it off to you, and let's take a look.
Okay, I'm just waiting for you to hand that over, and I'll
I did click on the confirmation. There we go.
Okay, fantastic. So let me go ahead and
I'm a former software development. I should blame it on the hardware.
Share that one. Let's go for that option. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen, so you can see the website. Just to kind of set some context, Alan's done a fantastic job of highlighting the issues that Google Workspace administrators will be facing with data oversharing. But to put a more of a kind of a real world scenario into this, we had a client, and they were an accountancy company. And a lot of the spreadsheets that they were sharing with customers were actually shared with the link. And then an individual left that organization, but also kept a list of all of the files that were shared with the link. And so they were able to continue to work as an independent accountant while still using all of the spreadsheets, the macros, and the IP from their previous organization. They actually stole a number of customers from the accountancy company as part of the exit that they had done, and they were still using the internal spreadsheets from the organization. We implemented Patronum for them, and very quickly we were able to show them who had access to that data, and quite swiftly they removed that individual user's access. So just to frame what Patronum is, and obviously this is the image that Alan has had in the presentation, but Patronum is a full suite Google Workspace management tool. We are renowned for being very, very competitive when it comes to email signature management, on and offboarding of users. But today we're going to focus on the file governance part of the product, and that falls into two categories when it comes to file governance. We have our base product, which is Patronum, and then we have Patronum Plus, which includes automations around file governance. So with that, I'm going to jump into Patronum. So this is the Patronum application. As you can see, it looks and feels very googly. That's specifically by design. We've taken the Google Material Design framework and we've built our product inside of that. And I can quite nicely just move around the platform and have a look at the end users of a particular organization. But as this session is focusing on Gemini and the data that Gemini could potentially leak, I'm going to click on the drive element. One of the things I would like to mention that's even more concerning than the Google products that have AI capabilities, it's the non-Google products, such as ChatGPT, which has recently announced that they have a Google Drive element. So you might have end users installing, without the permission of the organization, ChatGPT, and then connecting ChatGPT to your company data. Now, if they are a consumer, they are using the consumer version of ChatGPT, and therefore your company data could potentially be used to train and educate the ChatGPT machine learning languages, which I know from my perspective, I wouldn't want my company data being used to educate a third-party chat environment or a AI environment. So inside the drive section of Patronum, we have the shared drives. That gives you an overview as to every single shared drive that you can see in your organization, regardless of whether that's an internal or an external drive. So let's just talk about external drives. An external drive is a drive from another organization being shared to individuals in your company. Now, that is the quickest and easiest way to steal data from anybody using Google Workspace. The same applies to Office 365, so we're not highlighting something that is unique to Google. I can set up a Google Workspace domain. I can create a shared drive. I can share it with a company, and the individuals in that company could then start putting data into that shared drive. The data now belongs to me. I have effectively stolen the company's data. So it's also always useful to find particularly external shared drives, and we provide a filter that allows you to search for that. Inside the file sharing section, this is where things get really interesting. We are giving you visibility, and very easy visibility, over who has access to your data. I can again filter that, and let's say I'm interested in everybody external to our organization. And quite quickly, we can reveal that these 3 users have access to our data. I notice that Paul here has got write access to 16 files, and I might be a little bit curious about that. So I can click on Paul, and again, we return the exact files and who's sharing those files with Paul. Now, Paul may well have been a supplier to our organization, and at the time, it was quite reasonable to expect Paul to be shared on those particular files. But now we're no longer working with Paul, and so does Paul actually need access to those particular files? It might be that the files have been continued to be worked on after Paul has left, and Paul is now being exposed to data that he no longer needs to have access to, but it also could be a potential security breach, or at the very least a breach of confidentiality. So we would like to remove Paul's access from those files. Now we can do that through clicking and then clicking on the unshare, or we can click on this padlock icon and I can remove Paul's access to every single file that he's got access to. Now, let's say, for example, that Paul is a known supplier and we don't necessarily want to remove his access completely. However, we may want to downgrade the access. So we can do that by changing Paul from being an editor to a viewer of every single file that he's an editor of. And again, we can click on save. That will then send a request to Patronum, and Patronum will then quite happily reduce the permissions of every single file that is being shared with Paul. Now, I need to point out that the 16 files that we've got here currently belong to Jordan, but that may not necessarily be the case, and it's very unlikely to be the case in a real world example. Each individual user will be collaborating with different users, collaborating with the same users, and getting a view of all of your file data in this kind of fashion is impossible to do in the Google tools by default. And so if you wanted to perform some form of audit, there's just no way of doing this without having to visit each individual user and have the user click on every single file in your organization and say, who's these files being shared with? If it's shared with a particular user, then remove it. Within the filtering section, we have multiple options. As you can see here, we can see every single file that has been shared with the link. And so for me, this would be an ideal opportunity to investigate these particular files. I can see lots of different users have created and shared files just with the link. Now I might want to change that to being restricted so that only people who have access can view those files. I can download a list of all of those files, and then I can inspect those individually through a spreadsheet. I may then want to pick the files that I am comfortable to remain shared with the link, but the rest can then be unshared or the permissions changed. And I can do that by modifying the spreadsheet and uploading it back to Patronum and allow us to do all the heavy lifting for you. A few other filters which are of interest is what we call personal. Now, these are the gmail.com accounts that you may be sharing data with. From my perspective, it's never a good idea to share data with anyone on a Gmail account. It's a consumer-based account, easily compromised, and you could potentially be giving access to people who have not got the level of security that a normal business worker would have. In addition to that, viewing who has right access to your files is also extremely important, because if someone's got right access, that gives them the ability to reshare that file with somebody else. And so if you've worked with somebody on a particular file and you're the owner, they could then continue sharing that file with other people and you're never going to get notified. It's not as if you log into your Google Drive and have a look at the activity threads on every single file that you've got. Whereas through Patronum, you'll be able to see exactly who's got access to your data. So just quickly going through some of the other features from a file perspective, we've got the file search. File search does exactly what you would expect. It gives you the ability to find files across every single user's My Drive, any shared drive. You can find files by the link, by file ID, etc. File ID is really useful. Have you ever had that situation where you receive an email from somebody, you click on the file and it says you don't have access, please request access, and that then just goes into a black hole that you never really get a response. You can speak to your administrator, they can use Patronum, put the file in there, they'll immediately find out who the file belongs to, and more importantly, they can then share that file back to you if, based on internal policies, that is allowed in the organization. The compliance tab is part of our Patronum Plus offering. And the compliance gives me another view of who has access to our data. And this is on a file by file basis. Again, something that Google Drive just doesn't provide, but we're now giving end users the opportunity to see which of their files have been shared with which particular users. So end users can have access to the file sharing section and also the compliance section. And they can go through and unshare particular files with specific users very, very easily within this particular interface. Now, the compliance section can also be tailored based on a company policy. Now, this is our policy environment. The policies that we can create in Patronum help with things like user onboarding, user offboarding, email signature management, deployment of contact sharing, the distribution of internal contact information. But we're going to have a look at a file-based policy. So with the file-based policy, we need to define which files we are interested in. Do we just want to look at everybody in the company? So that would then apply to all users in the particular domain that we are in. However, we may want to limit this to the finance department, or we may want to limit it to different organizational units or different Google groups, and we can do that through this part of the scoping section. We then may want to specify, do we just want to have a look at shared drives? Do we just want to have a look at users' My Drives? And again, we can pick which particular sources of data we are interested in looking in. But for this example, we're going to use everybody and all the files in the entire system. Once we've defined where we're looking, we now need to decide on what exactly we're looking for. What are the conditions where we would be interested in knowing about from a file sharing perspective? So let's say I'm interested in files that were shared 5 days ago. I'm also interested in these files if they have been shared with anybody with the link or anybody from a gmail.com account. So I can say I'm interested in anybody who has been shared my files 5 days ago with a Gmail account. I can preview this and it will give me a list of the top 20 files that this particular policy will match. Now I've defined what I'm looking for. I now need to decide what to do about that particular course of action. I can email the end users. So if I'm looking at shared drives, I should be emailing the content managers and the drive managers to say, these files have been exposed, you need to do something about these files to bring them into compliance within the organization. I can email the end users of the organization. And we can do it either daily. I think daily is a little bit excessive, but let's say we want to send an email every week just to say, these are the files that you have shared that meet this particular criteria, i.e. they were shared 5 days ago and they have been shared with a gmail.com account. And we can just leave that to the end user and they can then deal with it. However, I always believe in the carrot and the stick. So let's add a stick. And let's say that if they do not comply, we're going to give them, let's say, 7 days. So after 7 days, we're going to unshare those files. So the end users will receive an email of all the files that do not comply with this particular policy. They will then be given the choice to safe list those particular files, i.e. I am happy that this file is shared with a Gmail account because I am working with X customer and I need this to be shared. Or I can put it on a snooze list, which is I'm working with a customer for a little bit, but please remind me in a while. But any file that they haven't acknowledged, we're going to unshare in 7 days. We can also add other options where we can override the snoozing, we can override the safe list, we can apply different types of labels. Well, that kind of gives you a very high level view over the power that you have within inside of Patronum. And we're more than happy to work with Alan and his team to demonstrate the power that you have behind Patronum, from anything from email signatures to on and offboarding, all the way through to Google Drive compliance. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand back over to Alan. Oh, I think you're on mute, Alan.
4 years of online meetings. You think I'd get the mute button, remember to unclick the mute button and get back online. So thank you, Paul, for that great demo. A reminder that that was a very quick look at the file governance component. Obviously, we could get into more detail about the sophistication of the rules and the actions and the follow-ups, and even creating use cases. So, for example, we're working with one organization. We're talking to them about Patronum as a service, in part because when they send a proposal, they want the client's access to the proposal to expire when the proposal does. So they're thinking, hey, I want to share this out, and the proposal is good for 21 days, and on day 22, take the permissions away. Make them come and ask for it again. Now, that's not how I like to run my business, but they want to do it that way, that's fine. So there's a lot of capability. And obviously, looking at all the sections of the application on the screen, there's a lot there. Onboarding and offboarding is key to making sure folks get on board, they're in the right groups, they have the right permissions to begin with. For companies with more than a handful of people, having that organizational chart so people can find each other. Email signatures, contact sharing, these are all things that we end up adding third-party tools. And Patronum gives us the ability to add one third-party, highly integrated management platform into our Google Workspace ecosystem without having to manage 5 or 6 different tools to get this all done. So thank you, Paul, for joining us and for that demo. And as always, we talk about what our next step should be. You as a business owner attending this webcast, you have to assess your needs and priorities. Where are you with respect to security? Not just because you're using Gemini or your team members are using Gemini or other third-party AI tools, but where are you with respect to your security, your admin management, and support for making sure your data is secure? When you assess those needs, and we can help you do that, we can help you select the services like Patronum that meet your specific needs, and then plan and actually deploy it, get it up and running to the benefit of your business. Where to start? If you're not sure where you're at, we offer a number of assessments. There's a URL and a QR code on the screen. You can check those out. Select the ones, talk to us. We can often do those at a steep discount or for free as part of our relationship building. So it's always an opportunity there. And if you have other additional questions, contact us. You can schedule time with one of our cloud advisors using the URL or the QR code at the bottom right corner of the screen, or reach out to info@cumulusglobal.com. And you're also always welcome to reach out to me directly. My phone number's up there. I warn you, I rarely answer the phone. I'm horrible at voicemail. Send me an email. I'm in my email inbox all the time. If I'm busy, I'll have a member of my team get back to you quickly. And so that sort of is a wrap for today. Appreciate everyone joining us, and get in contact. We'll follow up with you as well. We'll send you a link to the recording and some follow-up information as well. If you're interested, we're happy, again, as Paul mentioned, to do a more substantial demo, talk about your needs and your priorities, your budget, and come up with the solution that works best for you. So thanks for joining us, and have a great day. And Paul, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you here, and appreciate the time and the effort with the demo.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye for now.
So long.